This rule is written by cops, and in my opinion it was designed to criminalize more people.
Hashbar TV. Today is a very special episode because big changes are coming to California and medical marijuana. Crazy regulations where it looks like they are over-regulating everything to do with marijuana, medical marijuana. Deliveries, dispensaries are going to have big changes when it comes to this. Growers, edible makers, hash makers. There's so many different categories, and today we got a special guest, Stuart Richland. He's been in this medical marijuana field for 10 years, has 500 dispensaries that he's working with. He has been a lawyer for over 30 years, and this is one of his, I guess you call it, his specialties.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for having me on Hashbar TV once again. We're waiting now to see if the governor is going to sign these new rules, and I'll tell you, I kind of hope he does not. I do think there's some exciting stuff in there. There are licenses for making concentrates with and without solvents. There's a license for testers. There's a license for transporters. There's distributors. There's dispensaries. There's edibles. But they sort of didn't do it the way I would have wanted them to do it, and there's some things about it that I still think are lagging behind in fairness. The big switch is that now medical marijuana is going to be for profit. Up until now, and currently the way the law is, marijuana for patients must be non-profit here in the state of California.
Yes.
These new rules don't even use the word non-profit. Back in the old days, we relied on the concept of compassion. It was the Compassionate Use Act. So we had to have special, ways of dealing with patients that were non-profit. They don't even use the word compassion in these new rules. They have straight-out business licenses, but the hitch is that you cannot get a state business license unless you first got a city business license. So it's sending it back to the cities. Instead of regulating California medical marijuana in one whole piece, it's going to be even worse than it is now with a patchwork of different rules everywhere. So the other thing that's kind of bad about it is that those people who are relying on the nonprofits, who already had a nonprofit, who had a lease, who had employees, who have growers and other things, they have relied on this system and they have a defense that's in place, and it would be unfortunate if they have that pulled out from under them. Well, this new rule requires that you switch over from nonprofit to being for-profit and to having licenses by a certain date, or I guess you could continue as a nonprofit too. So there's going to be an interesting decision that each collective is going to make that's an established collective. Will they pursue a for-profit model or a nonprofit model? My concern is there are a lot of patients that do need marijuana that are more on the poorer side, older, indigent, on welfare or sick, and they need help. And so in the old way, someone like that who would approach a collective, they would get some special help. Now there's no provision in there for someone to get special help. This is going to cement in the power of the localities to do their own rules. And it also allows enforcement to be done by either the city, county, or state, and they get to keep proceeds from their enforcement. So there's like an incentive for the cities to go in and fuck with patients, because then they'll get the money from liquidating their assets, or the county or the state. So although it sounds like they're trying to help patients or regulate to facilitate marijuana access, really this rule is written by cops, and in my opinion it was designed to criminalize more people. And then as far as those people who are in the golden seat that already have a very, very strong license in a strong city, it gives them a permanent, semi-permanent upper hand, so that those people who do have a cooperative city and do have a license are going to find themselves able to stay open till 2026 without getting any of the special licenses in this rule. So it's going to be very different. Some collectives are going to have to get growing and transporting and testing and other licenses, and some groups, some dispensaries, and other groups are going to be totally exempt from that for 11 more years till 2026. So there's an example of unequal protection before the law. There are a lot of other weird things about this rule that I could mention. One is that there's a rule for making concentrates with or without solvents, blessing the notion that they're going to be allowing solvents to be used. Again, it requires a city to first say yes, and then the states presumably would be able to issue a license. There are also other requirements. You can't have a felony, including a marijuana felony, which some people think is quite unfair.
That's one of the things I was talking about that I thought was that they were definitely going to do to screw over a lot of these growers that have been in this since, 70s and 60s. They're still growing to this day. Right. And a lot of those people, if they've been growing that long, they probably have charges against them, and that's not fair because they're doing the same thing, and if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Under these rules, an individual patient is now limited. This rule tries to impose limits. It imposes a 10 by 10 limit on an individual garden, and it imposes a limit on how many caregivees a person may have if they're a caregiver. Neither of those limitations are in Prop 215, so they're illegal to be in this ordinance. So there are quite a few things right on the very face of it that are obviously illegal, that they should have known better than to try to step on the feet of 215. And they should have known better. They should have put something in here for compassion. They should have put something in here for poor people. And I don't know about flushing away the nonprofits and making it a for-profit industry.
Yeah, isn't the whole SB 420, all that, Prop 215, isn't that nonprofit?
It's all nonprofit. So is the jury instruction. So are all the cases.
That's one of the reasons why they tried to screw me in court, saying I was running it for-profit way, which I wasn't. And
correct.
Now they want to make it for-profit.
Yeah, that was the burden that you successfully met in court, is that you successfully convinced the jury that you were a legitimate nonprofit.
Yes.
That was one of the hoops you had to jump through. Even when they do pass this, the collectives will still be legit and will still have their defense for a year past the date upon which they first issue a license. So if it takes till 2018 to issue licenses, the collectives will still have their defense till 2019. So it's not like it's the end of the rainbow for collectives. There will be a transitional period, and I guess the collectives will switch over to being for-profit. And what I just want to make sure is no one gets lost along the way. To me right now, who's getting lost are the mom and pop growers. The people who might grow a small amount. Yeah. They can't afford to test it. The testing that's described is there's a whole long list of things that every batch has to be tested for.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So if a collective is relying on medicine from a mom and pop grower, that they take such good care of the medicine and they trim it and they bring such beautiful organic medicine, now that's the way it would be enjoyed by the collective members. But they're saying that no, there's no way for you to grow marijuana unless you're licensed, except for yourself. So, or your caregiving, a total of 5. So all of those people who've been growing now and bringing their medicine to the collective, they're throwing them into the black market or the gray market. They're not going to be able to participate with the collectives, with the dispensaries. And why? There's no reason. Since it mandates testing, we know that if Joe Farmer brought in medicine to a distributor that was tainted with pesticides, it would be rejected. So there's really no reason why the law doesn't continue to allow these mom and pop growers to grow. Instead, they're throwing them into this gray area and ultimately into the black market.
All that's going to be thrown out into the streets.
And when that happens, there's no taxes, there's no regulation, there's no testing, kids can get the medicine, so they're fucking up. We had it good when we had recommendations and we had nonprofits and we had a system where people didn't want to lose their business, so they'd be very careful never to let a minor in there or someone who was dealing. Apparently the government just doesn't understand how medical marijuana works. Instead of working with the phenomenon as it's evolved, they want to impose their view on it, which is to criminalize a lot of people.
When is this supposed to all go through?
If the governor signs it during this term, during this session, then it is going to be effective on the 1st of next year. But the collective defense will remain intact for a year past the first issuance of license date. Many of us anticipate that the government will not be ready to issue licenses till about 2018, although there's no guarantee exactly when. But assuming that it's 2018, then we'll still continue to see that collective defense will remain until 2019.
Let's say you have someone that's making concentrates, making hash, and they want to become legal.
Yeah, it's very tricky. First of all, they can't apply under the state law unless they're city legal.
Okay.
Right now, there are only 3 defenses in California for medical marijuana: the individual, the caregiver, and the collective.
Okay.
Right now, collectives have to be nonprofit. So someone who would be in a position of being able to apply for a license, the problem is they would also have to specify under this rule all their techniques. So in other words, they would have to fill out a form that essentially is a confession of what is still federally a crime.
Okay.
So there's a Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination problem with all this. That if this concentrate manufacturer fills out an application and explains that he intends to make concentrate and the address and all these things, and it's a tantamount to signing a confession, since it's still federally illegal.
Let's say you're a water hash extractor.
Well, right now state law continues to say that it's against the law to use a chemical to extract marijuana. Now, it doesn't say chemical solvent, it just says chemical. Is water or air or ice a chemical? Technically, they are. So when this is passed, though, there will be a new rule on concentrates, which will be you can manufacture a concentrate with a license.
There's also a new process, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called Rosin. It's where you have 2 heating elements and you put the bud in there and you basically squash the bud with the heat.
Yeah,
so there's no solvents, there's no chemicals being used, it's just heat.
That's correct. Yeah, rosin is not going to be an illegal way for patients to make a concentrate under the current rules.
Another thing I was seeing was if you make the hash or grow it, you cannot distribute it. They want it separate people. If you're a transporter, you can't grow, you can only transport.
Transporters can transport and distribute. So what I think the distributor is the juiciest of all the positions, because they're the ones who are going to be able to get marijuana, stock it, and then transport it to dispensaries.
So if you're making the hash, you're basically, your business is in the hands of these distributors.
True. There's also something in here where we can have appellations, which means fancy names, such as in France they have, that wine is a Beaujolais or a Bordeaux or whatever.
Yeah.
In marijuana, we're going to have Mendo or 818 or 707 or whatever different appellations. That's an interesting thing, and those will be protected by the government.
Yeah.
So if this thing goes through, ultimately, they're talking about having, marijuana, I guess, ultimately from California that's going to go all around the country and around the world. That's going to be famous marijuana, Beverly Hills marijuana or Mendo marijuana, whatever it is. I understand Berkeley is down to open up licenses right now. So if you see me fucking move, look me up in the Berkeley yellow pages, baby.
So let's say they're hearing about the new regulations and they have an edible company, they have an extract company, they grow, and they want to jump on this as soon as possible. What would be the first steps to do?
If someone wants to participate in this environment, the new rules say, yeah, you can get this state license, but it's not effective unless you get a parallel city license. It means that you can't even apply for these state licenses without a city license in your hand. In LA, it's Prop D. In whatever city you're in, it's those rules. There's a lot of marijuana foods out there in the market now. And when you read these new regs, they have defined marijuana foods as not drugs and not foods. But what that means is that the foods that are made with marijuana are not regulated by Food and Drug because they're not foods and they're not drugs.
Yes.
That's what they tried to do. Right now there's 3 defenses for growing: the individual, the caregiver, and the collective co-op. The individual will continue to be able to grow for themselves. In fact, now they can grow 10 by 10 as long as their city doesn't object. But this thing's fucked up. They say that if your city objects, you can't even grow. They should have at least guaranteed that every patient can grow. What if you're in one of those cities that has a ban and you're old or poor?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're far away from a collective. They don't allow deliveries unless there's a storefront. They've done a lot of things to limit safe access. Let's say you're a caregiver, now you can grow for 5 caregivees. Since each patient can have 100 square feet, if I was a patient plus a caregiver for 5, I could have 600 square feet growing.
Yeah.
But I can't sell that to anyone other than my caregivees who can pay me reasonable compensation. And then as far as a collective right now that grows, they need to start to figure out how to apply with their city so they can shift over to the for-profit model and get licenses. And if they can do it by the end of this year, they'll be able to continue without interruption. If they can't, they should try by 2018, and if not, then they're going to be shit out of luck, probably. And who knows if we get legalization this year, how that'll change everything.
Yeah.
We're about to try to get legalization on the ballot, and that means we're going to be voting for that in the next November.
That would change all of this, right?
Well, it would make it less meaningful if everyone can grow and everyone can possess and everyone can transport. Then we won't care as much what's going on in the medical. Now we're going to want to know what's the law going to be that's going to allow social and commercial marijuana.
Okay.
So I think we'll be less concerned about this in general if we do get legalization first. A lot to know on this one. I mean, we're still reading it over and over again to understand it. One of the fucked up things the government did was they negotiated this in private and in secret. They did not have hearings and a lot of public input.
So there's still a way that this might not pass?
Yeah, it's passed the legislature, but it needs to be signed by the governor.
If you have a felony, it looks like right now you're not going to be able to apply for any of these licenses.
Someone who's got a felony should be writing their letter to Jerry Brown about how unfair it is that these are some of the pioneers who were not even afforded the medical marijuana defense in the past. Okay. They may have been patients, and now they've finally lived to the point where we have a medical defense, but they have this old felony hanging over their head, and now they can't participate in the system. That's just not fair. Edibles are supposed to be generic now. So someone who wants to have a branding on their edible, they can't do it. Now, part of America is you use a brand to identify the quality of something and to know that it's good.
And it's for profit now. So what?
But they won't allow branding.
So what do? You just put chocolate chip?
Chocolate chip cookie. They didn't think about this right. Anyone who thinks, oh, I'll just go in the marijuana industry, it'll be, you know, so simple and everyone's rich in the industry, neither of those is true. I think at the end of the rainbow you have to realize that marijuana is a thing that's currently in the hands of the people. And right now the companies and corporations sort of want to steal it and take it away from the people. See, right now the only people who can run a collective are patients that are caregivers. They want to make it so corporations and public companies can run them. So what these guys are doing, really, the secret agenda is to steal the marijuana from the people, just the same way they stole the water, the oil, the air, the frequencies, the railroad right-of-ways. All of the best assets are always taken by these oligarchs. Now they want to take the marijuana too. That's what's really going on. Now they want to take the marijuana too. That's what's really going on.
Davey, what do you think about these new marijuana regulations?